spring practice has officially begun. It started on Friday. We got to hear from Josh Heupel post-practice. On Monday, we got to see more practice than we'll ever see. And all the viewing periods combined, probably the rest of the way. Got to see 8 periods and hear from Tim Banks and a slew of freshmen. Brent, 2 practices in. Again, helmets on, no shoulder pads, very early. But what's one of your takeaways so far here in the early going?
Well, it has nothing to do with the practice field for me. I think one of the biggest takeaways is when you talk about jumps from high school to college, everybody talks about speed of the game. I don't care if you're talking about football or if you're talking about other sports, whatever. It's speed of the game and it's competition you're playing against and all that. I think the biggest jump from high school to college is strength training and nutrition. When you look at it, I mean, and Rob, you can talk about this in basketball. You look at the transformation of bodies in a short period of time is the biggest adjustment. I mean, how many guys talking to the media on Monday talk about putting on 10, 15 pounds, 20 pounds in 7 weeks because of a nutrition plan and because of a strength and conditioning deal. There's your advantage to coming in at midterm, okay? Because it puts those guys elevated and it changes David Sanders. It speeds up his outlook. It changes Isaiah Campbell, DeJuan Morris, puts them in positions. That's one of the biggest things that's jumped out to me in 2 days and has nothing to do with the football, Eric.
No, it's a great point. And again, it goes back to probably my favorite quote from Monday with Tim Banks saying, like, hey, we got a lot of young guys, a lot of changeover, but, they look the way we want them to look. They look good, essentially, kind of going back to that strength and conditioning. They've been putting in the work off the field, and I think that's a great point. And not only that, but also it's, how many of those guys mentioned on Monday, like, hey, got to set that alarm for 5:45. Got to get up. Got to wake the body up. Got to, it's a new schedule. We didn't do this in high school, and just trying to not only get adjusted to the speed of the game, to learn a new playbook and all that, but it's just literally getting in the routine of being a college athlete. I think that's a really, really good point in terms of something that stood out, at least for me as well over the first 2 days.
Yeah, I mean, I think in the sport of football, Rob, I think anybody who has the opportunity to be a midtermer, which is about everybody in the country now, you're missing out on the. I mean, I'm not one for, hey, skip high school. Like that's a great thing. But when you're talking about trying to get to the football field and get yourself in a position to be somewhere, if you can get out early and get to college, there's a real advantage for being able to do that on the football field.
Oh, no question. I mean, again, I'm with you. I mean, I'm not saying it's a. I'm not advocating that kids, give up, don't play baseball their last year of basketball or go to the prom or whatever. But just, understand that if you do, if you don't, you're going to be behind, all 90% of your peers, and probably, it's not going to be impossible for a kid to not play as a freshman. That's a blanket statement you can't make, but man, you better be a heck of an athlete. You better be somebody special. If you're not going to come in at midterm and think you're going to, get on the field, huge advantage.
Brent and Rob both help me out here. This was 2019, and I know there's probably been others, but that's the last one that I remember of a freshman not being here as an early enrollee, coming in summer. And granted, the team was not very good, or 2018, whatever it was, whatever year that Pruitt year was. It was Darnell Wright. Wanya Morris was here, but Darnell Wright came in and played a lot of football. But that just doesn't really happen. Well, and also, that was a bad team.
He also was the 10th pick in the draft a few years
ago. I know.
I mean, it takes a different kind of dude.
I know. It's just, it's another good point. Yeah, I mean, that dude went on to be a top 10 pick in the NFL draft. So it just doesn't happen, which is kind of going back to the point. If you can be here, and, they're pretty lenient on prom. You can go miss maybe half a practice to go to your prom, but you don't want to miss these 15 practices because I think they're huge.
Well, I think it's the months outside of the 15 practices. I don't think David Sanders is putting on the right 20 pounds if he's in Charlotte, North Carolina right now, instead of being in Tennessee for the last 7 weeks. I don't think DeJuan Morris is gone from 160 pounds to 174, whatever he is now, if he's in Nashville. And that's no offense to any of them. It's just, it doesn't have the science that it has at this level. And there's so much science to this stuff. I mean, they basically had their own internal food truck in the complex on Friday, right? I mean,
It was literally it was a trailer. Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, it was in there.
Just in the last 10 years, that stuff has taken off.
Oh,
Would you not agree, Hubbard?
Yeah, it's become crazy what it is. I mean, it's all the protein shakes and it's all of the again, it's the science behind
and
it.
The individualized aspect of it too is way different than it was even a decade ago.
Yeah, and I think that's the end result of that is it puts young players in a position to potentially help quicker than they have in years past. You don't have to be the 10th pick of the draft to play early if you're here in January moving forward. And I think in some ways the game's going to get younger because of the portal and NIL money that's involved in bringing guys in. So I mean that's a big thing that stood out to me. Now when you get to the field, Eric, and what you see, we talked about it earlier. Listen, I'm bullish on Deshaun Bishop. I've been there for the last month and a half. I'm going to stay with that. No pads, so I understand all that. But I think his vision, I think, his ability to stick his foot in the ground and cut and go, I like where Deshaun Bishop is. And I think he's a little bit undervalued by a lot of Tennessee fans because he's a, quote, former walk-on. And he played in Knox County school system at Carnes High School. So he wasn't the 4-star from the state of Georgia and all that. I think the guy's a good football player. And nothing I saw on Friday or Monday suggested that he's gone anywhere other than up in his football ability if he can stay healthy. I like what he did. I liked everything Mike Matthews showed. I think it's got to translate. I think it's got to go to the field when they can get physical with you. How do you handle all of that? But, I mean, contested catches, I think he's really, terrific there. And then defensively, they got a lot of pretty bodies up front. I want to see what those guys look like when they put on pads. I want to see where Weathersby is in pads. I want to see where Tyree West, what's the next step for him?
I want to see where Isaiah Campbell is because
Isaiah Campbell,
out of pads, woo.
Yeah, I want to see what those guys look like when you get into pads. So it's a little bit unfair to pass judgment on anything in the line of scrimmage just yet, other than what their bodies look like because they haven't put on pads, right? I mean, it's one thing for David Sanders to kick step and block a guy versus getting bull rushed with somebody in full gear. And those days are coming. So we'll see what that looks like. But I think there's some things certainly to be positive about just in the eyeball test of the first couple of days.
I mean, I like this running back room, and I understand what you just lost. Phenomenal player, record holder for most yards in a single season for Tennessee history. I mean, I get all that, Dylan Sampson, but back to Deshaun Bishop. I mean, Ben and I were on the Deshaun Bishop and Walter Nolan beat there for the first month and a half of the season a couple of years ago, and we went. I mean, I had a couple of games of both those guys on TV. I mean, my point is, I watched Deshaun Bishop all 4 years play here, and he was always a good player. In my wildest dreams, I never thought that he'd be a contributor the way he is right now. And, call me a hater. It is what it is. Give him credit. He has worked. There's always been some ability there, but he has worked. I mean, his body is so much different now than where it was 2 years ago. He looks like an SEC running back right now, and I think that's awesome for him. But not only him, I think Peyton Lewis, such a high upside. And, Rob, maybe it's the 33 on that jersey, old school running back number, but Star Thomas in that 33 jersey looks good too. I like the collection of talent, at least, again, no pads they've got the first couple of days here.
Yeah, Dylan, obviously you can't say enough about Dylan, but I don't think they're bereft of talent, and I'm not anointing him, and I'm not just because he was a 4-star Hubbard, to be clear, but I think Peyton Lewis is a guy that looks like you want him to look, as as Tim Banks would say. Yeah. I'd be interested to see what he can do this year.
Yeah, I think his next step in growth and development is going to be terrific. I'm with you guys. I like that entire room. I'm fascinated to see where Star Thomas kind of factors in once he learns some things. But overall, I like that room. I think I'm as uncertain about the receiver room as I thought it would be through 2 days. Now, who knows what that looks like 3 weeks from now? It's 2 days, so you're not passing any judgment test on any of that. I mean, I like the way Travis Smith looks. He's clearly fully confident in what he can do. I like Mike Matthews, but I want to see, what does that group look like when it gets really physical, and they really get after each other. And, this is going to be, I think for this football team, all the judgment on this team is going to be about development. How much better are they the back half of September compared to the start of the month? How much better are they the second half of the year than they are the first half of the year? Because I think they're going to play a lot of young parts, and there's going to be a lot of young pieces in play there. And so what does some of that stuff look like? Receiver, what do they look like in the secondary? What do they look like at linebacker with some of the youth there? You're obviously going to turn it over a little bit up front with your defensive front. Your offensive line is going to look dramatically different. So how much do they grow and get better will be, I think, a true judgment on what this team looks like and what their ultimate potential ends up being when it's all said and done.
Yeah, I'm huge storyline coming into spring. Obviously, was the defensive backfield, the depth, and all that. And I think it might have been Jason Swain that said this on one of his shows a couple of weeks ago. You have a lot of inexperience at wide receiver, and now you've got some inexperience in the defensive backfield. So it's kind of like you don't like all those young offensive linemen. They kind of got baptism by fire last spring because they were going up against grown men on that defensive front. It's not necessarily like that with the wide receiver to DB battle this year. I mean, there's still players, but nonetheless, I was tracking, who's behind Boo at star. That's Dylan Lewis, for pretty much the entire day on Monday. And Marcus Gorey got a little bit of reps there from corner, slid over with the third team to star. You had Caleb Beasley that, unless I missed something, Brent, I mean, I didn't see him at corner at all on Monday, which, again, shocks me when you're trying to find depth at corner. But he's been playing some safety. Just kind of who's playing where, who's stepping up, and they're cross-training a little bit back there. The defensive backfield is something I watched a lot on Monday, and there's a lot of new interesting pieces there, and I'm excited to see kind of how they evolve from practice 2 to, the orange and white game.
Yeah, and I think the other big question, Rob, when you look at this team overall is where does your leadership emerge from, and who are your leaders, particularly on the offensive side of the ball? We've talked about it. It better be Nico, right?
Yep.
It has to be Nico when you look around. I mean, it's hard to look at that receiver room and say, boy, they got a leader emerging in that group, right? And I mean, it's hard to look at that offensive line group and go, okay, are we going to ask Sam Pendleton or Wendell Moy to be a leader? I mean, is your center who's going to be a first-time player a leader? I mean, we're going to ask David Sanders, hey, you got to lead that group. I don't think any of us feel like that's kind of Lance Hurd's cup of tea at this point in time. So who on that team, and I think you heard Josh Heupel talk about this on Friday and sort of the next step for Nico, it's how do you make everybody around you play to a level of expectation that is a different standard? And it can't just be you rah-rahing or you talk like it has to become a natural deal. And Rob, that's where I wonder about this team for their growth and development. Who leads? Who is going to be the bell cow leader, particularly on the offensive side of the ball?
And I think Nico's got that in him, but man, he's not I don't know. I mean, I don't think that he's a jerk a receiver's face mask kind of guy. But I mean, I definitely think he's certainly the comfortable with wearing that mantle. I believe, but he's also he's kind of California cool and quiet spoken that it's not. It's not an obvious alpha male situation, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Miles Kitselman is not an obvious choice in that position as well. You'd like for him to kind of step up, but I mean, I wouldn't say that's necessarily his cup of tea. What about a guy like Ethan Davis?
I mean, I think people look at Nico that way. I'm not saying that at all,
right?
Remotely.
Yeah, and again, I mean, I think Kitselman's trying to lead. I think he's doing some leadership things. Is tied in the most leadership play. I don't know. I mean, I think it has to come organically. And I think that when you're sitting here talking about sort of punch lists for spring, okay, you're looking for a center, you're looking for this, you're also looking for the leaders.
Yeah.
But who's going to become who tried to become a leader back in January and February, who's taking another step to that this month, and who takes that reins, throughout the rest of spring and summer. I don't know. I think that's an interesting question because you knew a year ago Cooper was your offensive line leader, Brew was your receiver leader, Dylan Sampson was your running back leader, and Nico didn't have to be real vocal about anything. He could go over and have a kind of a one-on-one calm conversation about whatever. Who's the guy now? I feel like Nico's got to lead the receivers as much as he's got to lead anybody on the offensive side. is he ready to take, and is he taking that next step to do that? I think that's an interesting. You're not going to get that answer the next 13 practices. I think the question when we get to August is, where is the leadership of this football team, particularly on offense?
Yeah, and you don't have to worry about that on defense because you go at every single level and you can say, well, there's a leader, there's a leader, there's a leader, there's a leader. I mean, there's 2 linebackers that can lead. There's several defensive linemen. There's at least one in the secondary that I'm thinking of right now. I mean, it's more of an offensive question for sure. They're going to practice 2 more times this week, all right, and then they're off for spring break. And I understand that no questions are going to be answered after 4 practices, but this time next week, or by the time they get back from spring break, what do you want to hear as a development for this team? What do you hope is a development? Like for me, like I want to hear that William Satterwhite is trying, hadn't locked down the job yet, but he's taking control of the center position and saying, okay, well, I'm the best one for the job right now, freeing up Pendleton to stay over at guard and not waste reps. He didn't have many reps at center, but he did get some reps at Monday at center. I want to hear William Satterwhite continuing to grow and try to grasp that center position for Tennessee.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I'm fascinated to see the Boo Carter experience and how much it grows and what it becomes offensively. He clearly, I don't think that was a window showing for the media to watch on Monday because he worked on offense on Friday as well. So he's worked there every day. How much do they continue to push there? What can he potentially become offensively or not? I think that's certainly an interesting thing to keep an eye on. And then I think the other thing for me is, where are they a defensive tackle behind, with Hobbs being limited? Where are they at with behind Moy and Eason? Who is tackles 4 and 5? Last year's 5th tackle was Elijah Simmons, who was at the NFL Combine last week. It's a pretty good luxury to have. They're not going to be there, but I mean, can Nathan Robinson be a guy who plays 20, 25 snaps a game for you? Can he become that guy? And then obviously depth in the secondary. Do you feel any better about that? But those are some things I'm fascinated by. Rob, I'm really curious about the Boo Carter stuff and how much two-way player is that really going to emerge and really be, because they're clearly working it right now. Probably even a little more than I thought they would to start spring practice.
But I also thought it was funny. Tim Banks on Monday said, Boo understands he came here to play DB.
As we're sitting here, Pod and I just got done, writing a little something about that for our defensive notebook today, and it just come across that quote. Yeah, it was maybe the second sentence out of his mouth. Boo understands he's a defensive back. But I do wonder. I mean, golly, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to have seen enough already to wonder what he could do if he just got 2-4 touches a game on offense. I mean, that could be impactful. But I don't know about most interested, but one of the things I just want to hear some chatter percolating about who's doing what at receiver. Who's standing out there. I feel like you have some talent, but good gracious, young.
I want to hear how much Travis Smith is beginning to talk as the weeks go on. If he's talking a little bit more and then a little bit more, because he said once he gets his bearings, he's going to start talking that smack. And so
he's got to make a few plays. I tell you what, I like his body, I like his size. Yeah. We'll see how that emerges.
I like his confidence.
Again, we talk about Mike Matthews made a couple of really nice back shoulder catches. Are those catches there if the DBs are not wearing oven mitts? And I love the oven mitt drill because it means you can't grab as a DB. It also probably gives you a little false sense of encouragement about a guy's ability to get off press man coverage because that guy can't grab you. Now, they don't wear them all the time for every drill. When they go one-on-one, they flip it up some. But, back to what Jason Swain was talking about. I mean, how much are they pushing each other with all this youth? And you got to be careful not to get a false sense of things, but what do you have? And I think we're still trying to figure out what they have, particularly at the receiver spot.